All right, hey everybody, we're going to get started. Thank you so much for being here for the At Journeys and Arya Stark panel. We're going to start off by just introducing ourselves, and then we'll dive right in. So I will start. I am Samantha, also known as Sansa Snark, contributing writer to Watchers on the Wall and co-host of our official podcast, The Night's Cast. You can find me on Twitter at the Sansa Snark if you are so inclined. And we also have the rest of our lovely panel, starting with...
Hi, I'm Jocelyn Womack. I do not have any podcasts, nor do I write for any sites. I am just a super fan. I do pop up occasionally in axes, like Twitter recaps on Watchers on the Wall. I love the show, and I feel very strongly about the Stark family, so I'm excited to talk about Arya today and really celebrate her.
Hey everyone, I'm Kyle, Azor Hype. I run a YouTube channel. I like to get really excited and talk about Game of Thrones and A Song of Ice and Fire. Super excited to be here with these lovely ladies, chatting about one of my favorite characters, and also Sandor Clegane too. So. You guys know I love Sandor.
Sneak that in there.
Yeah. That in there.
Hi, I'm Liz. I'm at eBiceline, if you know how to spell it. It's on there, on Twitter. I do not contribute to any articles, not even in recaps, and I don't have a podcast. Just have lots of opinions, chock full of them.
That's what we're all here for.
Exactly.
That's what we're all here for at Con. We all have opinions.
It's just great to be able to talk to people about
Exactly.
Game of Thrones. So.
Exactly.
Yeah, we're all a bunch of nerds, just having fun, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right, so the way that we're going to do this panel, Kyle brought up a good point when we were starting our planning for this, that Arya is a perfect example of the monomyth known as the hero's journey. And monomyth means that, it's not just in A Song of Ice and Fire that we see this, it's in tons of other literature and tons of other stories. And it's a journey that the character follows that it's not quite a formula, but it's a good template. And Arya really, really fits that bill as far as her story goes. So we're not going to touch on every single point of the hero's journey because there's like 14 of them, and we would definitely run out of time. So we're just going to touch on a couple of the most important points of Arya's journey, and then kind of how they fit into that hero's journey type of thing. A very kind of brief overview. Oh, and we're also mostly focusing on show Arya because book Arya, her story isn't over yet. So it's mostly going to be show Arya. A very, very kind of brief overview of the hero's journey is that you have a figure, they have kind of like this call to adventure, and they kind of they go through a process where they're going from the realm of the known into the unknown, back up, they kind of hit rock bottom, or they experience like what they call the abyss. They go through a massive transformation, and then they travel through the rest of the way through the unknown and back into the known, bringing all of that knowledge and all that experience and transformation with them. God, does that sound like Arya or what? I mean, that is...
Arya's story is a literal adventure.
Yeah.
And it's a really unique one.
The call to adventure, I think, is the best part for Arya because that is who she is. That is
absolutely.
Sure.
I think the first part that we'll touch on that is one of kind of the bullet points of the hero's journey is mentors, or kind of like supernatural aid, supernatural guidance is also kind of how it's seen. But we'll talk a little bit about that. Jocelyn, if you want to start off with some of Arya's earlier mentors, and how they influenced her.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, just as a general note, I think that in terms of story arcs, Arya and Sansa have the best sort of mentor relationships when you think about where they started and where they ended and who influenced them. And with respect to Arya, I mean, one of the moments that stands out, obviously, is Jon giving her needle. I love and adore and worship at the altar of the relationship between Jon and Arya. So I think that moment in which he gives her needle is so important. I know that there are much sort of more explicit references in the book, but we see it as a part of her journey where she's going back to needle, whether it's using needle to defend herself, using needle to remind herself of who she is. It shows you how your mentors can sort of manifest in non-traditional ways. I think we tend to think of mentors as people, I'm going to sit down with you and talk to you about my goals. But mentors can also be people who just set you on your journey by giving you a tool or giving you a nugget of information. And I certainly think that is what Jon was when he presented needle to her. Further to that, I think another important mentor for Arya was Syrio Forel. I mean, come on. Woo. Yes.
And Miltos was just up here. I'm guessing some of you got to go see him talk as well, so that's awesome.
And I think of all of the mentors that we're going to respectively talk about today, I don't know if there is a figure who looms larger than Syrio and Arya's trajectory over the course of the show. I mean, I know that some of my panelists are going to talk about the influence of Sandor, and I'm all on board with that. But I think even at the very end, what did Arya say to the gods of death? Not today.
Not today.
Yeah.
That is Syrio. He was so significant to her journey. I love the relationship, and I love that the writers found ways to weave the importance of his lessons to her. I mean, we could get into her taking down the Night King. I mean, being nimble enough on her feet to sort of elude being detected by, the various undead, the White Walkers coming after her. That's going back to the water dancing lesson. So I think he's important. And I think another mentor that I would add to that list would be Brienne of Tarth. And I think the importance, again, this isn't a mentor that Arya is spending a significant amount of time with, but I think Brienne is important because Brienne showed Arya, Arya said from the start, I'm not a lady. I don't want to be a lady of the house. That's not me. That's not what I do. And so when she comes across Brienne of Tarth that fateful day and sees Brienne, give the business to Sandor. And I say that as someone who loves Brienne and loves Sandor. I think that was extremely important to her, to see someone like her, to see a woman doing that, and that stood out to her. And there's nothing that brings me more joy than that sort of proud mama moment when Brienne and Arya are sparring and you get that musical cue in the background going back to Serial Pharrell, and Brienne just looks at her like, that's my baby.
You also
and I'm
have
proud of
the
her.
Brienne and Sandor moment when Sandor finds out she's alive again. They have like the little nod,
Yep.
Proud parents.
Proud parents.
So I think that Brienne is absolutely an important mentor in Arya's journey.
Yeah.
Yeah, she gives her another woman that that is a little different, but more similar line to her to look up to and kind of, say like, this is who I could also be in the world. I could also be like her.
I think the important thing that all of these mentors share is they're very honest. And when we talk about mentors, they got to be giving something, which is usually advice. And I think that in a place like Westeros that is so dangerous, and Arya specifically has a really unique journey because she has like 8 or 9 mentors that we can, talk about. We could sit up here and just talk about mentors all day if we really wanted. But I think, for me, all of you know I'm a little biased because I like Sandor Clegane. I think that it's so interesting because when we watch Arya's journey, she's kind of stuck on revenge for a long time, right? And it takes her a long time to go through that transformation into understanding that she has the power of choice to choose between life and death. And that's why we had that amazing moment after Daenerys was wrecking King's Landing and Sandor, he said, listen, if you come with me, you're going to die. And we had the same thing even with Jon in the final episode where he was like, listen, so I think it's really important that, and specifically for Arya, she got great advice from so many different people, and they were very honest with her. And in the end, I think that she took that advice to heart, and really, we see her kind of just taking the power of choice and then just doing her own thing.
Yeah, I think that, Jocelyn, what you mentioned about, the proud parents thing, Arya is a figure who collects parental figures. Who end up becoming her mentors in a lot of ways, which is interesting because she kind of loses her parents at such a young age. Liz, you had mentioned that Lady Crane is also a good influence and mentor to Arya and as a parental figure.
I think that Lady Crane almost becomes like the mother figure that she can relate to. I mean, like, she loved Catelyn. Catelyn was her mother. I don't want to ever take that away. And she was obviously distraught at the result of the Red Wedding. But where Arya is in her development and her path when she meets Lady Crane, it's as if she's adopting another mother. Like, she looked to Ned, and she definitely had a lot of Ned traits. She had the Stark features, everything. But Lady Crane was feminine. She was beautiful. She was an actress, but she also liked to put holes in men, and she could sew them up afterwards. And I think for Arya, that was really important to kind of see you can decide a little bit more of who you want to be, and it gives Arya a little more agency to accept femininity as strength as well. And I think that's going to be really important when she comes back to Sansa. Season 7 was not the best with their relationship, but
Don't understand what you mean, Liz.
I mean, the last episode was fine. But there's a moment in The Long Night where she hands Sansa the dragon glass dagger. And to me, that was a really beautiful moment because it's as if Arya's telling Sansa, like, I recognize all the strength that you've gained through all the shit you've gone through. Sorry. And you can take care of yourself. Because I think before then, they kind of see each other as like Arya's going to be the justice, Arya's going to be the protector, and it's this passing moment where they just kind of recognize each other, and she gets to acknowledge Sansa's strength as it is, and I think that she got that from Lady Crane. She didn't get that from many of the other mentors, or even her parents, and that's where Lady Crane was kind of the maternal side for her.
I think an interesting thing about the hero's journey too is there's so many different archetypes, and we know that Arya doesn't fit like traditional Westerosi standards, right? So, you know, we see it in the first episode. She's having shenanigans. She's playing with Bran and doing the bow and arrow thing, and just I find that so interesting about her arc, right?
Yeah.
And especially the conversation with Ned. That kind of, you know, she's like, you'll be a lord, you'll have a castle someday, and you'll be a lady, and that's not me. It's so important when we see these different interactions through multiple points in her arc.
Yeah.
See that return to that.
Yeah, one thing about the hero's journey too is that really the hero's journey anybody can undertake it, but what we've seen of it in literature is that it's usually, it sometimes is people who are thought of like as outcasts, or people who are different, people who don't fit the mold. They end up going off on their own and experiencing this journey. And again, I mean, can you think of a better example than Arya? If we're talking about mentors, I think obviously we have to talk about Jack and Hagar. Because I think as far as, you know, where it fits kind of chronologically is really interesting too, because yes, she has Jon who gives her needle. She has Syrio who starts to teach her, you know, the water dancing and how to actually use said needle. But Jaqen, she meets when she is kind of out in the real world, so to speak. You know, she's in the Riverlands. She's finding herself in the middle of, you know, a lot of major conflicts. And Jaqen is he is definitely, I think, the supernatural aid aspect of the hero's journey. That's kind of a big part of it because you have this, you know, normal person who is kind of helped along, like nudged along on their journey by what they call a supernatural aid or supernatural force. And obviously, I think Jaqen fits that bill pretty well. You know, he's not supernatural per se, but I think a faceless man is, I think you could probably apply that term to it. But he...
A whole nother panel.
Oh yeah, right. Definitely. But Jaqen is the one who Arya kind of, you know, she's given needle, and that's great, and it's a wonderful gesture by Jon. Ned gets her water dancing lessons with Syrio, which is also great and another nice gesture. But Jaqen is the first mentor that she meets where the stakes are so much higher for her. She's out in the real world. She's in real, actual danger. And Jaqen is the one who he has such a big influence on her and really kind of pushes her. He encourages her to take those next steps on her journey.
The list, right?
Yeah, I mean, the list, yes.
On a hero's journey, you typically have a character, like when they're on their call to adventure with a specific goal, but Arya is just, I mean, she's seen her father beheaded. That's something doesn't happen all the time, I would say, you know? So I find that really unique, and I think revenge drives her for so long, right? Like it goes throughout her arc, and then finally, eventually, she takes back the name of Arya Stark after wearing so many different faces, right? In the books and the show. So I think it's really interesting because we talk about the Campbellian myth, the hero with 1,000 faces. And that's why Arya's hero's journey is so interesting, is because literally she's wearing so many different faces throughout her journey. She's got so many different mentors that she's learning these life lessons from in this incredibly dangerous world. So I think we actually all spoke about this earlier. I'm like, if we could pick one panel to do a hero's journey on, I think we all agreed that we would do this one. So
absolutely, definitely.
Yeah.
Kyle, so you mentioned the list real quick, so we'll segue into a discussion of that because that's another really important part of Arya's development and her journey. Also, kind of fits into the idea of this hero's journey. There's a part where I kind of think of this as like the challenges and temptations part. Because the list is something that, you know, they tell her once she gets to the House of Black and White, no, you have to get rid of that. You can't be Arya anymore. You can't, you know. And she says that she does, but she never really does. Which is incredibly important to her character development, and even though it's something they tell her not to do at the House of Black and White, it still continues to push her along on that hero's journey and develop her character further.
It's identity.
Yeah.
Especially since like she's so quick to add everyone that's ever wronged her or her family onto the list. I mean, the temptations really come very early.
I shortchanged me at the grocery store.
Yeah,
Right.
Going on the list.
I can totally relate to the list. I'd like to maintain a list, not of people that I would want to kill, but, it's just, remembering the transgressions. But one of the things that Kyle and I were talking about is, there could probably be an entire panel on the discussion of the God of Death and how the God of Death is going to sort of collect that debt regardless of what, the person who is doing his bidding decides to do. I mean, when you think about Arya's list, over the course of time, there are people that she certainly changes her mind on. I mean, I think much to my relief, she took our dear precious Sandor off the list. I think he earned his way off of it. I think Beric Dondarrion earns his way off of the list, as does, I think Melisandre arguably earns her way off the list as well, but the God of Death came for all of them, regardless of whether the God of Death collected that debt.
Yep.
It's really interesting because that conversation between Sandor and Arya, where Sandor opens up to Arya, is kind of a point where things starts to change, even though she ends up leaving Sandor for dead. Because later in the House of Black and White, when the waif when they're playing the name game, they have the conversation about, what about Sandor?
Right. It's the first moment where you see just a hint of transformation start to come in, because Sandor is the first one she removes off the list.
She calls him the Hound, and it's not until their last moment together where she says her goodbye, "Thank you, Sandor."
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm gonna cry.
So why else is the list so crucial though to Arya? I mean, like I said, she's told that she can't keep it anymore, and the fact that she does I think is very telling, because she still always wants to retain Arya. Like, she never wants to let her go. Thankfully, she doesn't.
Right. It's not. She's the one who gets to make the decisions. Death isn't making them for her. Although, we can argue that Death comes and gets his debt from everyone.
Well, if we look at the power of choice for so many characters, like me and Jocelyn were talking about Jon Snow, like a lot of people influence Jon, and Jon's in these incredibly difficult decisions, and he makes these sacrifices for everyone, for the good of the realm. He wants to do what's good. He wants to make sure that everybody is safe. For Arya, it's so different, right? Because she feels revenge for so long, and she wants to make things right for her family. You know what I mean? She wants that revenge. She wants to get rid of the Lannisters. But her intentions, you know what I mean? It's like, so it's for Arya, that's what drives her for so long, is this revenge. And then we finally see that transformation when she actually starts to rely on these lessons, like from people like Tywin and Jaqen, and it's just incredible, really.
Yeah, we didn't talk about Tywin as a mentor, but I think there is.
Yeah.
I think.
Go
Would
ahead,
we
jump
consider
in.
Tywin as a mentor, you think?
Yeah, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, go, Liz, jump in. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, those were obviously, for anyone who's not a book reader, those scenes are not in the book, but I think there's some of the best scenes that we get in season 2, where she learns, I mean, she's picking up the notes, she's looking at the maps, and she just kind of understands how he looks at the family, and how she's different from that. And he I think he kind of, if I recall correctly, notes a little bit on Cersei, and she kind of, when they're talking about Rhaegar and the conquest, she brings up the 2 sisters, and it's kind of like, no, it's not just the men, Tywin, it's women can do it too. And I think she just, I don't know, I would love to hear what you guys hear, that what she got from him, because I just
like the
love
change
this.
from the books, by the way. How does everybody feel about this? Because I know there's some show-only watchers. I know there's book readers, because Roose Bolton was there in the books.
Right, yeah.
There's very few changes that I really, really liked more, but I actually liked the change of Tywin more in the show. I felt like there was a real connection there, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Very well.
Charles Dance really helps.
Right.
Yeah,
That helps.
Their scenes together were amazing, and I think what she learns from Tywin is, and it's not that Arya isn't. She kind of doesn't go back to. She learns subtlety from Tywin.
Right.
She learns
That's the word
subtlety,
of.
and she learns that you don't just kind of hack off heads. Sansa, I know, says that later too. Like, hey, I know it would be very satisfying, but we have to deal with it in a different way. I think that is kind of maybe is Arya's knee-jerk reaction, is to hack off heads and deal with it that way. But she sees in Tywin, who is this purported not only a military strategist, but just a very smart guy, a planner, a thinker. She learns a little bit of that from him, I think, and she learns the importance of it, and that it does have its place. It's not her first choice as far as solving a problem, but she knows the importance. She learns the importance of it from Tywin.
What's really interesting too is that she doesn't get Jaqen to kill Tywin.
Right.
Which
So that-
Gendry asked.
And then there's all the chain reaction from that, right? Because she's still in the early stages of finding which Arya she is. All the different faces that she has to wear. And she's still in that revenge mode really early on. So
Yeah.
maybe Tywin would have been eliminated a little bit earlier.
Could have changed things, but I do like to think that Tywin would have had a proud dad moment when he saw her take down the phrase. He would have been like, "That, well done."
Yeah,
Well
I
done, lady."
think so. I mean, he worked with the phrase, out of necessity, but I don't think he liked him very
He
much.
wouldn't have
I don't-
missed them. He'd be like,
yeah.
okay, I'm good.
He would have been like about Walder Frey, he would have been like, he got, that's his fault.
Yeah.
So we've mentioned the word transformation a lot, and the connection to death, of course. So those are also really important aspects of Arya's journey and where she ends up. So her connection to death, the massive transformation that she undergoes from the Arya that we see in season 1 to the Arya that we see in season 8 is also such a huge part of her journey, and it's a huge part. It's the bulk of the hero's journey monomyth as well. So I don't know who wants to anybody feel like weighing in on that first.
I mean, so Arya ends up killing the Night King, and one thing that's prevalent I find is the Azor Ahai monomyth and how it can be applied to so many different characters. Like, we're still trying to figure out who that is in the books. I personally like to associate it with Jon Snow, but it applies to Arya, the idea of this transformation that's happening in the show. And I'm not saying that Arya is Azor Ahai, but she goes through these stages of change, and obviously she's, for the Azor Ahai monomyth, he's, making his sword over and over again, and it's breaking, and then finally they make that final transformation in that their old self is, you have to die before your rebirth. So I think that that's really important for Arya, and when would we say that happens for Arya, though? Because there's so many different points where we can say, well, is that really the sticking point for her final transformation?
I don't know that it's the final transformation, but I think a very good, solid example of like when we know that we're seeing it is in the Winds of Winter episode, season 6, episode 10.
Yeah.
It's a literal example of a transformation because we see Arya using killing Walder Frey and using his face, so it's a literal physical transformation. But it's kind of symbolic of her transforming more so into her own person. Like it's an amalgamation of what she learned at the House of Black and White and becoming a faceless man, but also kind of merging that with her Stark past, her Stark present, even her Stark future, because she's taking revenge on those who wronged her family. So I think obviously she continues to change, to transform until season 8. But I think I love that episode, for so many reasons, but especially for that because I think that's kind of the first example that we can see where it's like this is the marked change, transformation in Arya. Because we saw her going through her training in Bravos, and that was great and everything, but it kind of could have ended at any point.
Right.
But once she got back to Westeros is really when that change starts to pick up steam.
Yeah, when she gets back to Westeros, she starts reconnecting with people from her past, because after she kills the Freys, it's at the end of the crossroads when she runs into Hot Pies, who's someone who kind of reminds her of who she was 3 steps ago on this journey, and then he tells her about the Battle of the Bastards, which, get hype, I guess. And we see Nymeria, and so I think it's reconnecting the Starkness of her, and it's reconnecting back, and that's where she changes her mind instead of going to King's Landing. I'm sure Ed Sheeran had something to do with it, obviously. But she turns back and goes to Winterfell, and I think that's where, it's her landing in Westeros, which I'm sure there's parallels could be made on the journeys that Daenerys and Arya both have on coming home to Westeros, but different panel, different time. But that's, it's killing the Freys, it's seeing Hot Pie, it's seeing Nymeria, it's these decisions and being faced, especially seeing the soldiers, where these are just people. These are just people that are trying to get through life. And maybe her revenge is not necessary.
I think the thing too, pass this to you really quick, Jocelyn, is like, she's so young when she first starts off, right? We have this long period of time that goes on, and then this like so many terrible things happen. So it's like, just imagine putting yourself in that situation, like when you're that young, like, could you have survived or reacted? And man, Arya's a champ, really. MVP, GOAT, Arya the GOAT.
I think the argument can be made.
I mean, there are arguments to be made for that.
Yeah.
I think in terms of the transformation, I think the moments that stand out to me the most are where you're getting sort of these senses that she's choosing life over death. And I think you touched upon that with the moment with Sandor, but I think that even in the choice to have sex with Gendry, before the great battle is coming, I know that there are mixed feelings about that. I personally, like the idea that she viewed this is a thing that people do, and I want to experience it and I want to explore it. I might die in the great battle tomorrow, but I recognize that there are parts of me that still want to sort of connect to humanity. And I think on a sort of larger meta note, it was nice to see a scene where you have a female character who's completely exercising her agency and being proactive about her sexuality and saying, hey, I want you.
Take your pants off.
Yeah, like let's get to it.
And let's be honest, Gendry's a handsome fella.
Well, no, I'm not kicking him out of the bed for eating crackers. So
Yeah.
So I liked that moment. I thought that to me it was a sign that, as much as I adore my little murder baby Arya, that there was something more complex going on there, and there was someone who wanted to sort of, continue to have this connection and this tie to sort of what it meant to be Arya Stark, and not just being sort of a badass assassin who ultimately takes down Night's King.
It fleshes her out, and it allows us as viewers and as Arya and herself to like explore her sexuality, which there is in any previous season we don't actually get to see where she is. Other than like when she's trying to hide as a boy and Tywin recognizes her as a girl, that she is a woman, she's a female, she's someone who's exploring herself in the last, what could be the last night of her life. And I think that is very important. And it goes back to, just amening on the agency, but like owning your own agency, owning the fact that you are a sexual being and that you do want to have this moment with someone is very important, and it is something that we don't get a lot of. And
it's one of the biggest transformations, literally, that anybody goes through, is that transformation into womanhood, adulthood, whatever, however you want to look at it. Going from, ew, boys were gross to, hey, Gendry, But yeah, literal, that is a literal, transformation that anyone goes through.
It was maturity.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And I love the fact that they gave that to Arya. The agency thing is wonderful, because unfortunately in Game of Thrones we did not see a lot of that. And I think the choice to make Arya the one who expresses her sexuality so freely the way that she does was really, I loved that choice. I thought it was fantastic, and I thought it did fit really well with her journey as she was going, because as far as she knew, Dawson, like you said, it could have been her last night on Earth.
Right.
Especially how she handled it afterwards. Like, Gendry wants to get married, and she's like, nah, I'm good. Like, it was cool. Yeah. Maybe another time, but
I don't know. There's still some tension in that last dragon pit scene.
Oh, that's just
my
Gendry
headcanon
trying to
is that
show up.
she goes west of Westeros, but she sails back every now and then, to have a good time.
With that booty.
Get a little booty call or whatever, indulge a bit.
That's a far way to go for that.
Quick side note, I don't know.
It's only when she's coming back to see Sam.
I don't know who's behind it.
Now this is a Gendry Arya ship panel.
We could, yeah. Well, quick side note, I don't know who's behind it on Twitter. I wish I did, so I could give them props, but there's an incorrect Gendaria discourse, I think is what it is, Twitter handle, and they just like imagine these conversations between Arya and Gendry, and they're hilarious because a lot of them are Gendry just, we love Gendry, but he's kind of a dumb.
That's how much we miss Thrones and want more of Thrones.
But it's just like, it's just hilarious. I had to plug it. Can't remember exactly what it's called, but just search on Twitter and you'll find it.
That's great.
Anyway, so we'll touch on a couple more points. We have a few minutes left here, and then we're going to do the last 10 minutes. We'll open up to some Q&A. I know that there are probably tons of opinions on Arya, and we want to hear as many of them as we can. So definitely the connection to death, the transformation there. And I think the transformation that she goes through, kind of sort of bucks tradition a little bit as far as the hero's journey goes, because hers is a little bit different. But I guess like let's just, we'll take a few minutes as a panelist to talk about where Arya ended up and what we thought of her ending. Liz, why don't we start with you and we'll work it out.
My hot take, my unpopular opinion. So for many years, I kind of expected and almost wanted Arya to die at the end, because I didn't know.
Hear her out.
I didn't know where her journey was going to go beyond becoming an assassin. And this last few seasons this last season in particular, where she really talked about being an adventurer and being a traveler and going to see like what's west of Westeros. It's obviously Westworld, but I love that joke. So I really like that, and it actually gave me a lot more hope in how she's going to be in the books and how her story fleshes out. Because I think it's an exciting end. I know George promised his wife he would never kill her. I didn't trust that. It's George, he kills everyone. So I guess that was kind of my own like personal protection, getting invested into her as a character because she is so great. But I'm super excited, and I loved how it ended. And that montage of her on the boat with like the choral, I think it's like a mix of the children or something. I can't remember the name of the music, but it is just beautiful, and it's so hopeful and empowering and exciting and just like a fuck yes moment.
So I kind of feel interesting about it. I kind of feel like Arya's like Frodo Baggins. She doesn't feel like there's anything left for her in Westeros. Winterfell kind of is like the Shire, and obviously seeing Arya running through King's Landing, kind of this like Mount Doom, King's Landing parallel. She's been through so much, and I feel like she's just, even though she has the power of choice to go do this, she's still broken in the end. I mean, she's still lost her father and her brother and all of that. So I really enjoyed the ending. I also probably could have saw her maybe as going to Bravos and kind of taking over the Lady Crane role specifically for the show, having her own troupe and pack. But yeah, I kind of see George's influence of Frodo within Arya's ending, and I actually enjoyed it.
Yeah. So apologies to anyone that was at the Endgame panel yesterday, but I'm going to sort of reiterate a point that I made there yesterday, in that, going into the final season, just generally speaking, as someone who loved the Starks and feels very much invested in that family and sort of their outcomes, I was worried going into the final season. I wasn't sure. I mean, when you think about sort of the trajectory, poor dear Ned lost his head. Then there was Catelyn and poor Rickon, who sometimes gets lost in the sauce. We don't even acknowledge him properly sometimes.
Rob with a wolf's head.
And then Rob, when I can't even go there with that. I kind of went into the final season trying to brace myself for like the absolute worst for the Stark family, because frankly the show had not given me a lot of hope. So it was a very pleasant surprise to get to the end and to find, Arya along with her siblings in places where, one, hey, they're alive, so that is a huge W there, and I will take that one every time. But to find them in places where you feel like they can find joy and find new purposes and sort of have happy lives. Yes, they have this history of seriously traumatic and terrible losses, but you feel this sense of like hope about her getting on a ship with her own crew. I mean, frankly, I kind of wanted her and Yara to find a way to be friends, because I kind of think that would be an awesome friendship. But, I love this idea that we see her venturing off on this new journey. My very first Con of Thrones, I went to an Arya panel, and I'll never forget that there was someone on the panel that was like, she's just gonna turn up dead in a pile of snow next to Needle. And I think that's a reference to the books, and I was like, no, I know that she trained with the Faceless Men, she, worshiped the god of death and all that good stuff, but I did not want that to be sort of a foregone conclusion, this idea that she has to die because she's ventured down this one path. So I like that the writers sort of turned it on its head, and at the end had this magnificent moment with Sandor where she sort of has this reckoning and sort of embraces life and what can come with that. And so for me, I think of all of the characters.
Her innocence, right?
Right, I think it's one of the more satisfying arcs on the show, for sure.
She makes the choice. She makes the choice.
Power choice, yeah.
Yeah, the power choice is something we talked about. Yeah, she makes the choice to kind of regrow and become, take a different path.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was very happy with Arya's ending in the show because they gave her the Alyssa Farman ending that I wanted her to have. All that was missing was the dragon eggs. But I was not a very big fan of how I thought they were taking Arya's arc in like seasons 5 and 6. I didn't like her training in the House of Black and White. I didn't like that they were now, and it's a little bit different in the books because we have the benefit of POV chapters and we know what the character is thinking. But Arya is not that cold-blooded as they kind of portrayed her, as she seemed like she was becoming, I think, during her training. I feel like they removed a lot of nuance from her character.
They did that because maybe they did that because in the show specifically because the impact of the ending.
Yeah.
Like a bigger change between those two moments.
They knew that this was going to happen.
Yes. But so eventually, though, you know, I feel like they fixed that, though. You know what I mean? Because they took her on this journey, and she went through this massive transformation. And Arya her ending became one of my favorite parts of season 8. I liked the fact that I feel like I said they kind of saved her story for me. Maybe I'm being a little bit harsh there, but I just
a lot of screen time too. She did a lot.
Yeah, I was not a fan at first of how they were, where I thought Arya was going. So I love the fact that it ended up as this, not sure what the word is, but just the way that everything, it came full circle for Arya, but also ended up being completely different for her.
Right.
And I loved that for her ending.
Got another call to adventure.
Yeah, and the fact that again, like
journey.
she's setting sail on the ship going west, it was just, it just made my heart so happy. I mean, it was just, I think, fantastic ending.
What does everybody else think about Arya's end? Are we happy?
Yes,
We have a mic up here.
Mike, we'd love to hear from you.
Yep.
If anybody wants to ask a question or you can
Yeah.
just shout it out, I'll try to listen.
What'd you think about our ending? Who's your favorite
Yeah.
mentor?
Yeah, come on up. We'll fit as many as we can into 8 minutes.
Hello. So obviously we still have a lot left to be written about Arya in the books, but if everything went the same way that it did in the show and she leaves the House of Black and White and turns away from the Faceless Men, Jaqen has made it clear to her in the past, you know, when she strayed from what they wanted, you know, we gave you a second chance, there's not going to be a third, but she still leaves anyway. Now, Jaqen seems to be okay with it and lets her go, but do you think there's any future repercussions for her doing that? Do you think she'll have to, I guess, ante up for that decision in the future? Will she go back to the House of Braavos at any point, voluntarily or not? Where do you see her interaction with the House of Black and White and the Faceless Men going forward?
So maybe we should do one for one. Just try to get as many questions in. And then,
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. God, why don't you go ahead?
I'll take this one.
Okay.
Yeah, so I hope that there's some sort of repercussions. I'm not trying to get on Jocelyn's list by any means, because I really do
Adding
love
you to
Arya.
my list.
I know, because I love Arya. I really identified with her when I first read the books. I grew up a tomboy. I grew up around a whole bunch of boys, like just kind of having to like fit myself into there. So I love Arya, but I do think that it's important for her and her journey to face some sort of consequence for that decision. I mean, in the show, she gave the waves face. I don't know if that's supposed to be the payment, but I would like to see some explanation in the books, even if it really is just that killing the waif was her payment. Like, that's fine. But I think it's going to be more eloquently written, obviously. So yeah, that's my...
I hope so too. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
So first of all, I've actually been studying the hero's journey like crazy lately, so it was perfect. And I actually wrote about Game of Thrones recently, so I was like, oh yeah, way to
Awesome.
go. For me, I think the biggest thing with Arya was, I feel like the episode 5 ending for her was almost better because there was just like this beautiful metaphor with the white horse, and she's like choosing life.
Shadowfax.
And
Yeah.
I just felt like,
Obviously.
I'm also like all about the Starks, and I was like, yay, they're alive, but they're all separate. And they're not together. And it's just like the whole like, oh, okay, the lone wolf survived. Like, you know, in the pack. And it's like the lone wolf dies, the pack survives. It's like, but they're not even together. So for me, with Arya, I was really happy about like she's choosing humanity and she's like doing this thing. And then it just felt like, okay, but now she's going to leave. Which is fine, which is cool. Like you said, another call to adventure. But I just felt like her arc didn't end. Like it just kind of restarted and she left everyone like the humanity. And I just felt like her hero's journey, like she, you know how you come back from the ordinary world and you like bring the gift and the elixir.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh no, like she's just leaving again. So I was just curious if you think, I feel like there were hints though that maybe she would return, like, oh, they need a master of whispers. And so do you feel like eventually, because I agree, she is broken. But I think like with Jon and with Gendry and like Sansa and all of them, like that reconnection, do you feel like potentially like once she finds like Essos and does her Christopher Columbus that she might return one day and kind of, or do you think she's just...
No,
yeah.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think
Yeah.
I go back to the scene with her and Nymeria. Nymeria was off living her best life with her own new pack. I mean, from my perspective, the way I see it is Arya, family will always be family to her, and that's not going to change, right? But I see her going and developing her own, like, little sort of wayward pack and just taking over whatever is west of Westeros. And those relationships and bonds that she develops being just as important, just as significant, and just as strong as those that she would have with her biological family.
Very much like Nymeria, the Dorners.
Yeah.
Right.
The
Yeah.
Dorner Queen. She's so independent, I think,
Yeah.
that she wouldn't come back.
Yeah,
She can
'cause
just
I didn't-
establish whatever she wanted.
Which is heartbreaking.
It is hard, yeah. And I didn't hate it. I was just like, oh, like, give me the rest. You know, it's
Yeah.
like, show me where she's going.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
I think that the phrase of like the lone wolf dies but the pack remains, I think that all the Stark kids took that and spun it on its head. And I think that's kind of the lesson that they took. They needed it when it mattered, but now they are going off on their own.
Yeah,
and
it's different now.
The lone wolves will survive.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Hello. So
Hello.
this is
I like your shirt.
thanks. Yeah, appropriate. When the waif stabbed her like 100 times and then threw her in the river, I know the first time I saw that I was like, oh my god, that sucks. We just lost an awesome character. Did you guys feel that same way the first time you saw it? And then I always kind of go back to that, like, how the heck did she survive that? Because she was just getting all that, you know. And
She had a lot of plot armor under that too.
Yeah, I
so
think
anyways,
it was a little...
it was just a general.
Did
but
you think they did that a little bit to like mirror John's For the Watch thing? I don't.
Possibly, but I think there was also just maybe just a little bit of suspension of belief that was
Arya has plot armor.
and
though, like,
what Liz
we can
said
agree
about
on-
plot armor, I think.
We can agree on that after season 8, the plot armor.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think the plot armor is what protected her ultimately, because when I watched it, I was like, oh, she's
And
dead.
George's wife Paris loves Arya and Sansa the most, so I think George
Yeah.
wants to survive. So
Yeah. All right, I think we have time for one more.
yeah.
I promise it's a good question.
Okay.
Awesome.
So I want to know if you guys think that the Faceless Men knew Arya had a greater purpose outside of becoming an unknown assassin. My theory is that they knew she had another job to do with her skills out in the world. So I want to know if you guys think that's possible.
I think it's totally
Oh
possible.
yeah, I love that
I think
idea.
she's
Yeah.
the faceless man's version of Azor Ahai.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, that wouldn't be the first time
Yeah.
in this story that somebody, knows that they're meant for something, and somebody else knows that somebody is meant for something.
Faceless men still deal with magic, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think
But that's
hopefully
that's
learn more about that.
it's feeding back into the hero's journey thing, because one of the reasons why they keep going, they hit rock bottom and they keep going, usually because that supernatural aid is kind of still there. So yeah, I buy that theory, definitely.
Yeah, the Faceless Men didn't want to be taken out by the Night King. They needed her.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. That's it,
Great.
guys. That's our time. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of
Thank
con.
you. We know there's a lot of other awesome panels out there, so thank you for
Yes,
coming.
appreciate it.
Thank you.